So so we're going to talk a little bit today about automating your business through technology, and it's not super organized. I apologize about that, but here's a bit of an agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about me, talk about marketing, talk about building software, deploying software. And a lot of this is just my personal experience from through like building and scaling multiple different companies. And so hopefully it'll provide some value to you. So just as far as my credentials, I got started in the defense community. I worked for Lockheed Martin for 10 years and ended up creating a new skunkworks division of Lockheed. It was very accidental to effectively chased out of the company for a lot of different reasons, but I helped grow that to about $1 billion in revenue, working with the original skunkworks on some of their projects. And then I worked for a company here in San Diego called Salute and helped them scale from 6 million to about 70 million. And then I worked for a company called Omni Federal and helped them scale from around 3 million to 60 million in a couple of years. And my own company, Valerian Technology, we've scaled it pretty significantly over the last 4 years. And I've been working with some other companies as well as a fractional CTO. And that's a very encompassing term. It can be technology or writing code, or it can be technology as it applies to business, and growth and scaling and all the things, right? So it's very adaptable based on the customers. And now I've hit the wrong button. So what do? I work for 2 different companies. I own both of them. One is called Harpoon, and that's a no and now low code Kubernetes platform. Happy to talk about that, outside of the talk. And then Valerian Technology is sort of my consulting company. So I do a lot of different fractional CTO consulting for different companies. Work with some more well-known companies like Docker and Bessemer Venture Partners, and some, investors like private equity firms with VCs, and also, bootstrap startups. So it's a wide range of different companies we get to work with, and it keeps my life interesting. So I really enjoy it. So a lot of this talk is just my lessons learned in scaling different companies throughout the years and working for myself and running into a bunch of problems. So I've inevitably made a lot of mistakes doing all of that, and so I'm going to share some of the lessons I've learned in doing that. Being a CXO, because I feel like being a CEO and a CTO and all kinds of different things forces you out of your comfort zone, and requires you to constantly learn new things, because ultimately, especially as a CEO, you have to learn something and be like, cool, I'm total shit at this and I need to give this to somebody else, but at least I know how to grade somebody now that I know how to do that. So in my career, I've had to learn technology, and I've learned to learn business and sales and marketing. And I mean, I'm like marginally okay at a lot of those things, but here's some things that I've learned in working in all those different areas. So if you're in marketing, I apologize for the sins I'm about to commit. Like me in particular, I don't know, just have bad luck. I'm Irish, so that doesn't make any sense. But, like we've just gone through a lot of really bad marketing agencies and marketing firms and people that are supposed to be really good at marketing and just are not. So we've had to learn some hard lessons in marketing. And hopefully these slides will save you $15,000 a month if you're starting a company, because definitely they would have saved me that much. So like the first step we did in the whole content marketing space, if you have started a company or you're running a company, you already know this is important, because if you don't have content marketing, you don't exist. So the first thing we did is that I did everything myself, and I didn't sleep, and I sucked, and I didn't really have very good results. And so the next step was to measure, like getting Google Analytics and Google Search Console and be like, wow, I really do suck. And like ultimately I had other things to do and I kind of ran out of time. And so I was like, what is the most expensive CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, fractional CMO that I can hire that's going to be the best at everything. And I hired one, and he was like God on a piece of paper. You know, he was like the best CMO you could hire, and he was horrible. Like, he had no idea how to do marketing for a startup. And we wasted a lot of money, and he accomplished nothing. So we hired a really expensive resource to do everything. And ultimately, like, we fired him, and then we started hiring, like, okay, this is not going to work out. So maybe we can find the best of each particular thing. So SEO, graphic artists, technical writers, website editors, things like that. And so we started, like, my wife actually did all the work, so I wasn't going to take credit for it, but like, that's her over there. They found like all the best of everything, and ultimately we're paying hundreds or thousands of dollars to like these different, you know, special niche experts to do different content marketing stuff for us. I mean, it worked. We kept some of them ultimately, but then we ran out of money and we had to increase efficiency. So we started to outsource things to different countries. And I mean, we actually had pretty good results with that. Like, we were able to hire some good people in different countries to do like exceptional work. Honestly, some of the people for the least amount of money were the best people. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. But ultimately, like, managing people is a shit job. You know, like, if you've been in management before, like, you don't want to do that. And you know, like, people have problems and they get sick and other things. And so, like, we ended up trying to look into ways to automate things. So we outsourced to computers. So here are some of the things that I use now. We use a lot of ChatGPT to write our blog posts. I'm sure some of you guys do the same thing. And, you know, like, what's really interesting is, like, I think a lot of people go to ChatGPT and think it's like this magic machine that you can just type, like, write me a blog post into, and you can. But ultimately, it works a lot better, and people believe that you wrote the things that you wrote if you, like, put a little more effort into it. So, you know, like, you can also tell ChatGPT, like, write me a bunch of, you know, write me 100 blog post topics on XYZ, and then you get your blog post topics, and then you take those, and then you start paring down a little bit, and you say, like, you know, like, what is an outline for this particular topic, right? And then you break it into 5 different paragraphs. And then so you just kind of work with ChatGPT like you're dictating something to somebody, and you end up with a much better result than, say, like, write me an 800-word blog post on elephants, right? So from that standpoint, there was a little bit of lessons learned as far as, like, how do I work with the technology? How do I make sure it, like, seems believable and good? Because, I mean, the truth is, like, yes, I would like to write amazing blog posts about all the things that I know, but I just don't have the time in my day as a CEO. And blog posts are really just about SEO ranking anyway, and everybody knows that, right? So ultimately, you know, the biggest problem wasn't even coming up with the content. Once we got, like, figured out how to use ChatGPT, it was coming up with the images for the blog post, because nobody cares about what you wrote. They just want to see the cool graphic that you put on the top of your blog post. So we started experimenting with Midjourney, and the original stuff that I started getting back from my queries to Midjourney was the stuff of nightmares. I mean, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but ultimately, we started figuring out, like, the things to say to Midjourney in order to get, like, reasonably good blog posts. And the worst part of it was I kept telling Midjourney to, like, increase the width of the blog post so it would fit in our website, and it was like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. So we stuck it inside of DALL-E 2, and we said, like, draw the parts of these things that we're missing. I mean, this is ridiculous that we're, like, going to these lengths just to create an image for a blog post. I mean, like, this is the state of technology today. So you can actually take an image that Midjourney generates for you with, you know, like, an elephant that is hunting a bear or whatever, and then you can stick it inside of DALL-E 2, and you can say, like, you erase all the around it, and you say, like, draw me the rest of this thing, and then you can take that and you can have the width you need to stick on your website so it doesn't look weird with all the other images you have for your blog posts. And then, I mean, there's only so much you can get, so we stick it in Photoshop and we, like, put our border around it or whatever, and there's still manual steps in that, but ultimately we use like Webflow for our website, making things. We use Squarespace for a long time because I don't have the time to do website design either, but ultimately like no code tools, and we're going to get into this in a second. Like the problem with no code tools is like they're really good at doing the specific thing that they're built for. And as soon as you want to cross the line of what they were built for, it becomes 10 times harder than like writing a bunch of code and doing everything yourself. So, and then ultimately we post everything on LinkedIn because that's kind of where our customers live. But, I think we could do a lot more as far as automation in this space, but there's always like an ROI as far as what am I doing manually and how hard would it be to do the automation steps? And does that make sense? And at the moment it doesn't, but maybe we'll get there someday. So this is a example output of what our magical computer brains do. This is like our latest blog post about what makes Kubernetes complex. Obviously, one of my businesses is about Kubernetes, so these are the types of blogs that we're writing. I mean, I don't expect you to read this, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good at a generative AI standpoint. I did not design any of this. It was all computers that put this stuff together, pirate ships. So, I mean, ultimately, the board around here is the Photoshop piece, and we paid a graphic artist to build that. My wife paid a graphic artist to build that. So, but, pretty good for free generated content marketing. So the next horrible lesson we had to learn about was cold email marketing. And personally, I hate cold email marketers, and I definitely hate people who call me and ask me to buy their stuff. But I mean, the truth is that nobody knows you exist, then who are you? I don't know. So some of the lessons that we've learned is copy is king. Like a lot of the marketing people that we've worked with are bad at writing copy. I don't know, maybe a marketing person is good at writing copy, but we don't know any of those. So I've written a lot of the copy for our companies. Definitely don't use your main email domain. I have done that, and our customers don't get our emails anymore, so we had to buy a new domain, and it was expensive. And definitely don't send too many emails in a day. It's probably common sense to most of you, but it wasn't to us. And I mean, when I say too many, I mean like 50, not like 500 or 6,000 or anything like that. And in a lot of these tools now, you can use multiple email domains. So like go trigger happy and buy a bunch of domain names that, are semi-relevant to what you're doing, and then plug them all in, because then you can send more emails in a particular day and you can get more reach to your different customers and hopefully more sales. So another problem we ran into when we first started was we used tools that were really good at sending emails, but not so much at getting data and metrics. And that's like really key to having success in the industry. So definitely use a tool that shows you open rate, click-through rate, and then also like user engagement statistics. So ultimately, even though it's kind of expensive, we settled on HubSpot because it provides like really granular level data as far as the emails that you're sending out and the things you're doing. And these are some screenshots of our emails and sort of like their performance, so you can see the open rate, the successful deliveries, the number of people who hate us, who have unsubscribed from our cold marketing email campaigns. But then you can also see like the top click links that were clicked in the different emails that we send out, and who the specific people were that clicked through. Like this Vlad guy, he fucking loves it. He sees it 30 times he clicked on links in our cold emails. So I probably need to go fly to Russia or wherever he's living and like just give him a handshake. But and then you can see like the actual percentage of people that are clicking through different links and things in the email. So data is important, I think. Like maybe that's common sense, but and then ultimately, originally we were just forwarding people to our website, but utilization of landing pages, sort of customizing it to the certain email cadence that we're sending out, and the different customers that we're targeting, like provides much better results as far as like I'm talking about certain things in an email cadence, and then I want you to go to a website. Doesn't it's not good to just dump them on the main page if I'm talking about, are you ready for the next step in your digital transformation journey? And then it's like, here's my website. Has nothing to do with digital transformation. So you want to guide people along the journey. You want to make sure that like the experience is seamless throughout. So another area that we use automation is user onboarding. So there are a lot of people that sign up for our product. And we originally started using Webflow forms, and then ultimately ended up building AWS simple email service into our actual application. It saved some money, and it allowed some more customization. But the problem with that was then I got a bunch of emails in my company email address. There was a bunch of just random like Jack Smith signed up for your application, and this is the company they work for. And I was like, this is really awesome that people are just organically finding and signing up for application, but nobody, like nothing's happening after that. People are just signing up, and then they're like, cool, I'm going to try to use it. And like nobody's reaching out. Nobody is really guiding the user. So we ultimately ended up creating email cadences for onboarding users. And again, copy is king. Like we made it kind of funny and, get people to open the emails and look at what we're doing. So we wanted to send to our CRM, which is HubSpot, with no code. So we used Zapier, and we failed horribly the first time because apparently Zapier doesn't allow you to just take emails and find stuff in the body of emails, which is how we were using SCS from Amazon Web Services. So we then had to figure out, like, we need to use a middleware, mail parser to, like, dig out the key value pairs from the body of the email into, like, actual, like, this is the user, and this is their name, and this is their email address, it was the company they work for. And then from there, we're able to create contacts and companies in HubSpot and start sending them and enrolling them in lists and onboarding email sequences and things like that. Which again, because we're using HubSpot, we can see like very granular level details, like who actually opened the email, what links do they click on, do they click on the user documentation, or do they click on the like your app sucks link, and do they unsubscribe, things like that. So it allows us to see like the engagement from the users when they actually onboard the app and what they're doing. Obviously, that's like a sequence of emails over a couple of weeks. So our big problem here was that we wrote some, amazing copy to convince people to schedule time, to talk to us, to use the application, and nobody cared. Like nobody wanted to talk to us. Nobody wanted to tell us whether our app was cool or whether it sucked. So we went out in search of an answer to this problem. We found LogRocket. There are some competitors out there, and like you can choose whichever one works for you, but the LogRocket basically records user sessions of people using your website or your application. We have some other application called Hotjar we use for our website, but it wasn't very good for the granular level details of web applications. So we switched to LogRocket for our actual application. And it provides a ton of information. You literally sit there and watch movies of people using your application and see everything they do. And you can actually build automations into that as well. And that really helped us understand that there were a lot of confused users using our application. And so that led us to building like an interactive tutorial inside of our application to start guiding users through the problem areas that we found. We actually were able to see and document some bugs that users ran into using LogRocket. And we were able to, add that to our backlog of software development and actually fix issues with our underlying software because we were just watching people running into bugs or other issues. And ultimately, we ended up creating a point-based system for creating deals from a sales perspective and moving positions in pipeline to the CRM. So we identified values for different things that a user would do in the application, like, linking different accounts, deploying software, doing other things. Like, what is a commitment from the user, and how does that translate into points? And that actually automates through our sales pipeline in HubSpot. So when people do different things in the application, it'll move them down to different sales pipelines of the application, so we can spend more time with the customers who are serious customers and that are really trying to use the application to deploy the software, because that's what our software does. And that actually really helps us pinpoint the people to talk to from a sales perspective and a CRM perspective, all through automation. Like, there's nobody has to sit in the loop and do all those things. It's just like automated, and it starts moving things down the deal pipeline in our HubSpot to the point where the salespeople pick it up and they say, like, hey, let me spend a bunch of time harassing the shit out of you because you clearly want to use our application, and like, what's it going to take to push you over the conversion rate from free to paid user. So I think eventually we're going to use a lot of the HubSpot API to integrate directly, because there's no reason to do extra steps with LogRocket and things like that, but that's probably the next step for us. So from a building your software perspective, I think, from a minimum viable product standpoint, this concept became really famous from a lean startup perspective. So this guy named Eric Rise, I'm not sure how to say his last name, but he created this whole lean startup thing and minimum viable product. I guess he was a student in a Stanford class from this guy named C. Blank, who was really teaching the concepts. But I'm totally bought into this concept, and I am the worst possible person at implementing it, because I spent like 4 years developing my software before I tried to sell it. But what Eric says is that you should do as much as you can to build as minimal as possible product before you can actually sell it. And so I think that's a really great idea. I didn't follow his advice, but I think you should if you can. So from no code tools, from a low code tools, there's so many options today on the market as far as like, can you build some sort of wireframe, and can you go out and try to sell that, or can you build something that sort of works or provides some minimal value, and then can you go sell that? Like, that's really what the minimum viable product is about. So what can you harness with a no code and a low code ecosystem to go build that out, whether it's Bubble or Airtable or whatever? Like, there's a lot of options today. Ultimately, you may have to build custom software, and we'll get into that in a second. So here's a bit of a timeline. I just made it up. Like, it's probably not the de facto timeline, but it's what makes sense to me. This is like the no low code timeline. So in 1995, this seems crazy to me that it wasn't that long ago that the internet started existing. Like 1991 is when websites existed. And I mean, pretty much everybody here was born then. Not my son Nico, but everybody else was alive. In 1995, you started to see like the what you see is what you get website editors. There's a bunch of them. I use this one called Hippie. There's like Microsoft Front Page. There's a bunch of different things in the ecosystem. In 2003, WordPress started to exist, and they were just a bunch of pages for making blogs. And they kind of fit into the ecosystem, I think. In 2004, there was Squarespace started to exist, so it was drag and drop website builders. And then it kind of goes from there. So Shopify started existing in 2006. And like Shopify only really became super huge and everybody knows about it. It's like the e-commerce giant pretty recently, but they started in 2006. And I think the important thing to note from this timeline is like, this is when they started. They probably sucked in 2006. Like, nobody was using Shopify in 2006. And that's how long it took for these things to sort of get traction. I put Google Sheets in here as well. Like, I don't know if it's really like a application no low code timeline, but like a lot of people consider spreadsheets to be like a low code application builder. So at the end of the day, it's really just like a database. So in 2012, you have like the Bubbles and the Airtables. Like, these guys are huge now. But again, only like 10 years ago is when they started And then you have Zapier, which everybody uses to marry like third-party SaaS applications together. It started around the same time. And then in 2013, you have Webflow as like the first, like I think it's like the first low-code website builder. You know, like Squarespace that really had the no-code thing nailed. Some of the like Wix, also terrible tool that I got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just gonna write everything in JavaScript. So Webflow is the first tool from a web design standpoint, drag and drop standpoint, that also said like, and you could also like modify the JavaScript or the CSS if you really want to. It's still kind of a pain in the ass, but it's pretty good. So and then 2018, this is kind of where things get weird, right? Like you start with this whole declarative programming thing. So using artificial intelligence. So AppSheet, they got bought by Google. They had this thing called Spec. And again, it probably sucked in 2018, but at the end of the day, they were using AI to do the sort of declarative programming so that you could generate things through AI. And then obviously everybody's heard of ChatGPT, so I'll spend a lot of time there. But 2022, people are typing like, write me the source code for some video game about an elephant, and it's like, here you go, right? And then the truth is, it's still a long way from working. Like if you're a software developer and you're looking at the things that ChatGPT spits out, it's kind of like, all right, that's kind of impressive, but also this code doesn't compile. So, like there's a lot of work to be done there, but I definitely see this is sort of where things are moving in the future. And I think there are some realities when it comes to no and low code. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but no code tools typically have to be descriptive to be valuable. Like people are taking very subjective things and they're saying like, let me make this really easy, even though it's a complex thing, and let me make it super easy through drag and drop or through AI or something else. But again, once you start moving outside of the comfort box, then everything starts becoming excessively hard. And you're like, why is this hard? Like it should just be one extra thing. But the problem is that most no code tools are very prescriptive in their ability to do things for that exact reason. So low code tools are extending that box and saying like, okay, like you should be able to do the things directly outside of the box. And so we'll allow some sort of customization, and here's like the underlying scripting for it in case you actually want to do it. And so the future probably involves artificial intelligence. It may alleviate some of these problems. But for the near term, it's probably going to require some babysitting. Like even if you ask ChatGPT to build you a blog post, you want to make sure that you read through it before you post it on your website. You don't want a bunch of content about Nazis on the moon randomly showing up on your website. And the same thing for the source code that it generates. In the near future, I think you're going to see, no code tools, low code tools, like married with artificial intelligence. So especially the whole generative AI thing, like, okay, now that I can drag and drop and I can sort of do the scripting outside of that, maybe I can just ask the AI to extend this capability out beyond those borders. So growing up is hard to do, right? So eventually you move past this no code, low code phase, and you're like, actually, there isn't anything to help me, and I'm all on my own, and I have to build custom software to get some job done, or it just becomes practical, right? Because I spent 9,000 hours throwing darts at the no code or low code tool, and it's just like, no, I can't move the box over there. And just so you're like, okay, how do you just hire somebody to write some software for me? So when you're building software, I have extensively worked with people who want to move to this phase, and there's a few things that you should definitely get right if you're trying to move to this phase, and that is a clear plan. Like, there are so many people who hired me and they're like, I want to build X. You're like, cool, I can build X for you. And so you start going through the process and they're like, just kidding, we're actually going to build Y, right? And then, 3 months in, you're like, cool, I'm going to throw all that software away, we're starting over, we're going to start building Y. And then they're like, just kidding, we're going to build something completely different, we're going to do this thing over here. I mean, I have had clients who have wasted so much money, just like changing their mind about what they want to build and, you know, how it's going to fit into their plan. And like, I literally will coach these clients and I will say like, do not write custom software. This is not the future that I want for you. Like, you're going to be sad. Like, things are going to work out. And then still they're like, shut up. I want you to write me some custom software. Like, I don't care if you do it. I don't care if some outsourced team does it, but I want it done. Cool, right? So at that point, you say whatever you want, but, you know, like, tell me what you actually want to build. Let's make sure it's what you want a year from now, because it is deceptively difficult to switch mid-frame, like, what do you actually want to do? You also definitely want to trust the technical resource. So I work with a lot of private equity firms, and they buy a lot of companies, and they hire me to do technical diligence on the companies. And if I had to give you an estimate of the quality that sucks on 95% of the companies that get acquired through private equity firms, I mean, it's bad. Like, there's a lot of really bad software out there, and that's fine, you know, because most of these private equity firms are really more interested in the book of sales, and they hire me because they don't want to get sued. So if they like, has this company been hacked before? Does this company have like a database that they've exposed full of PII and PHI to the public internet? You know, like, what are the things that I can get sued for, and how bad is it, right? And so ultimately, why do you need a trusted technical resource? Because a lot of people will go hire a firm that's not super experienced, or they'll hire entry-level software developer that then they call a CTO, or a bunch of different things happen, right? And they're just trying to get market share. They're trying to build product market fit, and like, everything's totally fine, but people don't realize that this was like a throwaway prototype that we got in order to get market share and get to the point where we can sales. And then there's just never a point where they look back and they say, you know what? This software's probably not going to scale. Like, maybe we should refactor it. Maybe we should sit back and figure out, like, how do we get to the next level? And so that what happens is they ended up buying more and more expensive resources from Amazon Web Services or Azure, and they just vertically scale themselves into oblivion. And then I show up around the time they want to sell the company, and they're spending $500,000 a month in AWS because they've got like the, you know, 9th level of hell, Xenon, Elephant, Master, Pokemon version of EC2 that they're using to, you know, keep their software running on life support. And I'm like, yeah, I think we need to refactor the software. So, and then the last point is you probably need to budget if you're trying to build software. Like, I've had clients who they have infinite money until they don't, and they keep changing their minds, and they didn't have a trusted technical resource. A lot of the times that I get called into companies is when they've either hired an in-house team or they've hired an outsourced team, and I just show up for the free consulting meeting, and they say like, so we've been building this mobile application. And I said, well, how long have you been building it for? And they say, I don't know, 9 months. And I just start asking friendly questions like, when's the last time you got a demo? We've never got a demo, right? And so, you know, I'll say things like, isn't that kind of weird to you? And then usually this is the point where everybody looks at each other across the table and says, shit, right? So just having some of these plans in place, having a trusted resource in place is really important if you want to build your own software. And there is no field of dreams software development. Once you build it, you own it forever. It's like your child. Like, you don't build it once. You have to update it. You have to maintain it. And it gets really, really expensive. Trust me. So eventually you build your own custom software, and you have to figure out how to make it accessible to the rest of the planet, because it doesn't really work on your developer's laptop. And this is the point where I start shamelessly advertising on companies. So if that's not what you're here for, then you should leave that. But when it comes to deploying and maintaining your software, all of your software has to live somewhere, right? We call that production. And you know, people have invented these terms like the cloud. A lot of the times they mean like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or Azure. And as a software developer, like I've personally been very frustrated in these environments, and the UIs aren't super awesome. It's kind of like I spin up resources and they don't work the way that I want them to, and things like that. And then you start getting into, like really production environments, like what's high availability and what's secure environments and how to scale different things. And it all goes downhill from there. So a lot of people these days use this concept called DevOps. So development and operation together. It's a nice vision, but what it means is that software developers got sick of the operations people and they replaced them with software. So we don't really advertise that, but it's like if you lived in a former era where you wrote a bunch of code on your development laptop and then you handed it to like an actual ops person, and the ops person told you were an idiot and that your software doesn't work, and you're like, you're the idiot because I'm looking at my software working right now on my development laptop, and clearly you don't know how to configure a server, right? And then you argue with that same person for the next 6 months before you figure out that like they had a different dependency version than you did, and then they just had to change the dependency version, and that's what made them run in production. Then suddenly it becomes very obvious to you like why the full DevOps thing kicked off and became popular, because at the end of the day, humans make mistakes. That's why generative AI is becoming very popular, and computers just do the same thing every time. So people have inherited this concept called DevOps, and they write infrastructure as code. So it's like code that stands up virtual infrastructure in the cloud, and also configuration as code. That's like I make sure it's configured correctly when I stand it up. And they basically call this entire ecosystem DevOps. So that's where my company fits in. That's where Harpoon fits in. It's a no-code Kubernetes solution that allows you to drag and drop your software into this workspace, and you can magically, dynamically generate all of the underlying infrastructure as code and configuration as code to make sure your software is secure and scalable and does all the magical things. And that's pretty much it. So if you're looking to contact me, whether it comes to consulting, or you just want to meet for coffee, or you want to use my app that I spent a really long time developing, definitely reach out. These are my websites. Here's my phone number. Here's my email. Thanks so much for coming.